The first man hit the ground before he understood he was falling. Kia Davis Kong did not look at him. She was still holding the phone to her ear, a grocery bag hanging from her wrist, saying in the same soft voice she used to order coffee, "Honey, I'm going to be 10 minutes late." The line clicked dead. 4 men left. One had a knife. One had her purse strap in his fist. One was already backing away because some animal part of him had started screaming a half-second before his brain caught up. The fourth, the leader, smiled at her like this was going to be easy. "Are you sure?" she asked him. He laughed. He shouldn't have laughed. The knife came first. She turned her wrist. The blade went somewhere it wasn't supposed to go, and the man holding it made a sound no grown man once recorded. The grocery bag never left her arm. A single persimmon rolled to the top and settled. 20 seconds. 2 men down. The one with her purse threw a punch. She caught his arm the way you'd catch a falling cup, almost polite, and then his shoulder wasn't where shoulders go, and he was on his knees screaming. The one backing away turned to run. He didn't get far. She wasn't fast the way action movies are fast. She was fast the way a closing door is fast. Final. Quiet. Done. That left the leader. He'd stopped smiling. "Please," he said. Down the street, a teenager stood frozen with his phone up, recording everything. She noticed him. She always noticed everything. She just didn't care today. She set the runaway persimmon back in the bag and stepped over the leader like he was a puddle. "Tell whoever sent you," she said, "that I was having a really nice morning." Then she walked home. The bags never touched the ground. If your jaw is on the floor, good. Tap subscribe and turn on the bell, because this woman's secret is bigger than that fight, and you do not want to miss what her husband does when he finds out. Section. She let herself into the penthouse quietly, set the grocery bags on the counter, hung up the cream coat. There was no blood on it. There never was. The apartment smelled like coffee and something faintly, lovingly burnt. "You're late," Siwoo called from the kitchen, standing guard over a pan like it might escape. 11 minutes. I was about to call again. "Did you walk the long way?" The line at the register was long, Kia said. It was the easiest lie she had ever told. He turned, and his whole face changed the way it always did when he actually looked at her, like the rest of the world had just been a waiting room. He'd made breakfast. Of course he had. Eggs that were only slightly criminal, rice, the little side dishes she liked, 2 coffees, the table set properly, and a single flower from the arrangement he'd sent 2 days ago laid across her napkin because he was, underneath all that billionaire steal, completely ridiculous about her. "You set the flower out again," she said. The flower fell there. Naturally. Gravity. He pulled out her chair, kissed the top of her head, his hand lingering on her shoulder. "Sit. Eat. You went out on an empty stomach again. I worry." He sat across from her, chin propped on his hand, and watched her take the first bite like her enjoying his slightly burnt eggs was the entire point of his morning. The little dog circled once and collapsed across her feet. "The eggs are a war crime," she said. But I'd eat them every day." He grinned, the cold and feared Kong Siwoo gone completely, and reached over to wipe a grain of rice from the corner of her mouth with his thumb. "So, what kept you?" 11 minutes is a long line. And Kia, who 40 minutes ago had put 5 men on the ground, picked up her coffee, looked her husband in the eyes, and said, "You know how it is. Everybody wants the good persimmons." He laughed and believed her completely. After breakfast, he came back transformed. The dark suit, the sharp lines, the cold expression that made grown executives lose their train of thought. He stood in the middle of the bedroom holding his tie, looking for all his billions, completely helpless with it. "Come here," Kia said. He came. Of course he came. She turned him by the shoulders, flipped his collar up, looped the silk around his neck with the ease of a woman who had done this 100 mornings. He watched her face the whole time. The shark went somewhere quiet whenever she had her hands on him. "You could learn to do this yourself," she said, folding the knot. "Why would I, when my wife does it better?" She smoothed the tie flat, brushed an invisible bit of lint off his shoulder, tugged his collar into place, then stepped back and looked at him properly, top to bottom, the way you check a thing you've decided to keep. "There. Now you look like you could ruin someone's whole quarter." That's the goal. He caught her hand, and kissed her palm. "What's your day?" "Quiet. Errands. The dog has a vet thing at 3. He pulled her in for a proper kiss, the kind that made the dog huff and look away, then pressed his forehead to hers the way he did every morning, like he needed one more beat of her before the cold face went back on. "Lock the door behind me. And eat lunch. Actual lunch. Go to work, Siwoo." She watched from the window as he crossed to the car downstairs, the cold expression sliding over his face the moment he hit the lobby. 2 men. The same man. And only she got the real one. She leaned on the doorframe a moment longer than she needed to, smiling at nothing. Then she locked the door, exactly like she'd promised. She told herself she was only going to check. That was the lie she let herself believe as she sat at the kitchen island. Just a look. 5 idiots who picked the wrong woman on the wrong morning. Random. She'd confirm it was random and forget the whole thing. Her hands knew better. She ran it back, the way her father had taught her before she was old enough to drive. Not the fight. The minute before the fight. That was where the truth always lived. They hadn't been waiting for a target. They'd been waiting for her. The car had been parked, not cruising. They'd let 2 other women pass, and moved only when she came around the corner. The leader had set the other 4 before she was even close, cutting her angles to the road. That was an opportunity. That was a plan. Somebody had told them where she'd be. So she got the laptop. She told herself she was just going to look at the street. But her fingers were already moving, and they remembered things her conscience wished they didn't. The traffic camera at the intersection. The bank's exterior feed. A convenience store cam whose owner had never changed the defaults. Old habits. Old back doors. A login she was almost insulted to find still worked. The feeds bloomed across her screen, and she hated how easy it was. She found the car first, parked 20 minutes before she turned the corner. She pulled the clearest angle, froze it, cleaned the image the way she'd cleaned 1,000 others in another life, and a face sharpened out of the blur. 40 minutes and 3 camera networks later, she had 2 of them. They were nobody. Low level, rented by the afternoon muscle, the kind who don't know who's paying them and don't ask. Neither had the discipline to plan what she'd watched them try, which meant someone above them had. She followed the only thread she had, a number, a shell, a name that turned out to be nothing at all, a dead end built by someone who knew how to build one. And that was the part that made the cold settle into her chest. The men were amateurs, but whoever had pointed them at her was not. The trail didn't fade. It was cut. Clean. On purpose. By a hand she couldn't see. She closed the laptop and sat a long moment, both palms flat on the cool counter. She thought about telling Siwoo. Then she thought about his face that morning, helpless with his own tie, telling her to eat an actual lunch. She thought about the quiet she'd married him for. "It's nothing," she said out loud, to the dog, to the empty apartment, to the version of herself she'd retired. The dog lifted its head and did not believe her either. Across the city, on the 58th floor of a tower with his name on it, Kong Siwoo was being a billionaire. Glass and cold light, a long table, a dozen executives in good suits, none quite as good as his. He listened to the logistics report with the still attention that made people sweat. "The Busan expansion is over budget." "By how much?" 9%, sir." "Find me 6 of it by Friday. Keep the rest." "I'd rather pay for it done right than save money on something that breaks." Decisive, exact, generous where it mattered, and merciless where it didn't. An assistant refilled his water, without being asked. He was 29 years old, and the room was terrified of disappointing him. He closed the meeting in under 30 minutes. The moment the door shut, the cold face came off. His lock screen was a photo of Kia laughing, and looking at it did something to his whole posture his board would not have recognized. He typed, "Did you eat an actual lunch? 3 dots. I'm taking the dog to the vet, Siwoo." "That is not what I asked." He pressed the intercom. His assistant appeared in 3 seconds. "Order lunch from that place she likes. The dumplings she pretends she doesn't crave. Send it to her, not here. 2 orders. She'll say she isn't hungry and eat both." He glanced at the corner of his office, where a shopping bag sat he hadn't mentioned to anyone. A coat she'd looked at twice and put back, thinking he hadn't noticed. He noticed everything she did. Have these sent to the apartment. No card. No card, sir. She'll know. She always knew. He had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, and exactly one thing worth spending it on. His phone buzzed, a photo of the dog at the vet looking deeply betrayed. He laughed out loud, alone in his glass tower, like a man with no empire at all. Then he rolled his sleeves down, put the cold face on, and went to ruin someone's quarter. Dumplings found her before she'd left the vet's parking lot. A rider pulled up, handed over a warm bag, a receipt with no note, because the absence of a note was the note. She ate one order in the car before she started the engine. She'd tell him she wasn't hungry. She'd eat both. They both knew the script. When she got home, the bags were waiting inside the door. Not 3. A small wall of them, glossy and ribboned, set down by the building staff who had a key and a healthy fear of disappointing Mr. Kong. The coat first, the one she'd looked at twice and put back. Earrings that cost more than the car she grew up being driven to school in. A scarf so soft it didn't feel real, the exact deep orange of a ripe persimmon. And then the rest, because Siwoo did not know the meaning of restraint where she was concerned. 2 handbags. 3 boxes of shoes. 1 pair so impractical and beautiful she laughed out loud. And at the bottom, laid in tissue like something sacred, a gown, deep and dark and elegant, cut to do exactly one thing, and it would do that one thing devastatingly. He'd guessed her size perfectly. Of course he had. She sat among the wreckage of tissue and ribbon and just held it all. She had spent years owning almost nothing. You travel light in that life. You don't get attached to things because things get left behind in burning buildings and foreign airports, and so do people, and the only way to survive it is to want nothing you can't carry out a window. Now a man bought her a gown she'd have to be helped out of and sent it home with no card, because he knew she'd know. She called him instead of texting. This one deserved a voice. He answered on the first ring. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, before she'd said a word. You bought me a gown, Siwoo. And 2 handbags. And shoes I can't walk in. You can walk in anything. I've seen you. And you looked at that coat twice. You only look at things twice when you really want them and won't let yourself. Wear the gown tonight. Why tonight? Because I'm taking you out. Be ready at 7. And do not eat first, because you'll say you're not hungry and then steal half my plate, and I want you to have your own this time. This is too much. It is nowhere near enough. A pause. I missed you today. You text me 40 times a day. 41. And I still missed you. 7. She walked out in the gown, and Kong Siwoo forgot every number he had ever known. He was waiting by the door in a black suit with no tie, because she hadn't been there to not one. He'd been checking his watch. He stopped checking his watch. He stopped doing anything at all, actually, just stood there like a man hit very gently with something heavy. Don't, Kia warned, fastening an earring. I'm making the face internally, with great dignity. He crossed the room, took her hand, turned her once, slowly. Kia, I'm going to sit across from you and starve. The restaurant was the kind of place that didn't have a sign. One quiet room high above the city, one wall of glass, soul spread below in a carpet of light. The staff kept their distance because he'd asked them to. He pulled her chair out. Then, instead of sitting, he crouched by her feet. Siwoo, what are you doing? Your shoe. The strap's twisted. You've been walking on it since the car. She had been. She hadn't said anything. He noticed anyway, and crouched there in a suit worth more than the restaurant's monthly rent, and fixed the strap with the careful attention of a man defusing something precious. You're going to ruin me, she said quietly. That's the plan. They ate. He talked about the Busan expansion and the executive who'd nearly fainted. She told him exactly which board member had been lying last week and how she'd known, the tell in the man's hands. He listened the way he always listened to her, leaning in, completely still, like she was the only frequency worth tuning to. This was the part nobody saw, the genius nobody credited. He'd close a contract next week on something she'd noticed across a table, and the papers would call him brilliant, and he would let them. You should sit in on the day 1 meeting Thursday, he said. I want your eyes on the younger one. Something's off, and I can't place it. I'll come. I like watching you work. You get this little crease right before you decide to destroy someone. I do not have a crease. It's why your enemies lose. He laughed, caught her hand across the table, ran his thumb over her knuckles, and for a moment the city glittered below them, and there was no cut trail and no 5 men on a Tuesday. There was only a man hopelessly in love with his wife, and a woman who had spent her whole life learning that nothing soft ever lasted, letting herself believe, for one more evening, that this one might. I'm happy, she said, surprising herself. It still surprises me that I get to be. He lifted her hand and kissed the back of it, the same hand that could end a man in under a second, though he didn't know that yet. Get used to it. I plan to keep you happy a very long time. She almost told him then. The 5 men, the cut trail, the cold thing in her chest that wouldn't go quiet. She didn't. She let him keep the evening instead. They went home with the city still glittering behind them, and the moment the door shut, she wrapped her arms around his neck. Thank you. For all of it. The gown, the dumplings, the shoe in the middle of the restaurant. You're amazing, Siwoo. Everyone tells you you're powerful. Nobody tells you you're kind. Something moved across his face, the look of a man not used to being thanked for the soft things. I had help. You're easy to be kind to. They ran a bath, the big one. He washed her hair the way he always insisted on doing himself, his hands careful in a way that had nothing to do with the towers and the men who feared him, and she leaned back against his chest and felt the thing she chased and never quite caught. Safe. Not on guard. Not reading exits. Just safe. Afterward, they tangled together under the covers, his arm heavy and certain across her, the dog claiming the foot of the bed. The city hummed 11 floors below, and somewhere in it a trail had been cut by a hand she still couldn't see. But not tonight. Tonight her husband mumbled something half asleep into her hair, and she laced her fingers through his arm and sank into the one warm thing she'd never been able to plan for. She slept without dreaming. It was the last good night's sleep she'd get for a while. Thursday, she came to the day 1 meeting, on Siwoo's arm in a tailored suit the color of dark wine. The executives in the corridor nodded politely and thought nothing of her. Mrs. Kong. Pretty. Quiet. Lucky. She let them think it. Invisible people get to watch. And she watched. The day 1 people filed in, led by an older man with silver hair and a handshake like a closing deal. Beside him, the younger one Siwoo had flagged. Mid-30s, expensive watch, a smile a little too good. He greeted them with exactly the right amount of charm, and she filed it away and said almost nothing. Siwoo ran the room, cold and precise. The deal was a joint logistics venture, ports and shipping lanes, and a great deal of money. Kia poured herself water and watched the young one. He was nervous, but not about the deal. The deal didn't touch him. His hands gave him away. He turned his pen over and over. He checked his phone twice, jaw tightening at whatever he saw. And once, when Siwoo mentioned the Busan routes, his eyes flicked up too fast, then went carefully, deliberately blank. She'd seen that exact flatness before, on men hiding which side they were really on. At the break, Siwoo leaned close under the pretense of refilling her water. Well, the old man's honest. Greedy, but honest. Push him on Busan, and he folds by Tuesday. She turned her glass. The young one isn't here for day 1. He flinched when you said Busan. He checks his phone like a man waiting for instructions, not messages. Somebody put him in that room to listen, Siwoo. He's reporting your shipping routes to someone who isn't at this table. Siwoo's expression didn't change, which was how she knew he'd heard her completely. To anyone watching, a man being handed water by his decorative wife. Underneath, the shark had smelled something and gone very calm. Noted. The meeting resumed. Siwoo, who'd been pressing hard on Busan, smoothly stopped mentioning it, talked around it, gave the room nothing. In the elevator, alone, he looked at her. You're sure? I'm sure he's reporting to someone. Not sure who or why. She watched the numbers fall. It might be nothing. Corporate espionage happens to men like you every day. But was the cut trail. But was 5 men on a Tuesday. She almost said it. But nothing. Just watch him. I'll keep my eyes open. The doors opened. She smiled, took his arm, and walked out the soft wife again. She just couldn't shake the feeling that the pieces were starting to point the same direction. The next morning they went running, the early kind, before the city woke. The river path nearly empty, gray light over the water, the dog trotting between them. Siwoo ran like he did everything, with controlled, relentless efficiency. Kia ran beside him at an easy pace that hid exactly how fast she could actually go. "You're holding back," he said, breathing hard. "I'm matching you." "That's insulting, and I want you to keep doing it." He reached over and squeezed her hand. He kissed her temple at the end of the path, sweaty and grinning. "Breakfast. I'll burn the toast personally." She held his hand the whole walk back and did not tell him she'd already decided what she was doing the second he left for work. The moment he was gone, she opened the laptop. Just the young man from the meeting. Just enough to put the feeling to rest. She started with the building's visitor logs, reached the way she'd reached the cameras, through a door she remembered. Park Jun-seo, junior associate, day 1, hired 14 months ago. On paper, clean. A resume so tidy it was almost rude. She didn't trust tidy. Tidy was something you built. She pulled the thread, slow and patient, and the tidy resume started to fray. The 2 years before day 1 didn't hold. A consulting firm that existed only as a registration, and a phone number that rang nowhere. His phone was newer than his job and busier than a junior associate should be, a cluster of calls to a single burner that lit up every time. She checked the dates, every time Siwoo's company had a closed-door meeting. Park wasn't spying for a rival. He was reporting on a schedule, to someone careful enough to use a burner and patient enough to plant a man 14 months early. She laid it all out side by side. 5 rented men pointed at her by a hand that cut its own trail clean. A junior associate planted over a year ago, reporting to a burner. Both careful. Both patient. Both circling the same household from 2 directions. One at the husband, one at the wife. The same hand. She felt it the way you feel weather changing in an old wound. She picked up her phone. His name was right there. She could type all of it in 10 seconds, and he'd believe every word. Her thumb hovered. Then she thought about his face on the river path. "You're easy to be kind to," she thought. If she told him, the warmth would change. He'd look at her differently the moment he understood what she really was, and she wasn't ready to watch that look arrive. So she did what she always did with a problem too dangerous to share. She decided to handle it herself first. Find the hand. Quietly. End it before it reached him. Before she ever had to see his face change. It was, she would realize much later, the worst decision she made in the whole affair. But that morning it felt like protecting him. She put the phone down, screen dark, and got to work. Across the river, in a part of the city that didn't show up on tourist maps, a man named Doo-jin was being told that 5 of his men had failed. He did not take it well. His office was the top floor of a building he owned through 3 companies that owned each other. He sat behind a desk with nothing on it and listened to his lieutenant explain, carefully, that the woman had put all 5 in the hospital. "How long did it take her?" Doo-jin said. The even voice was the dangerous part. 5 trained men. "How long?" "Witnesses say under 5 minutes, sir. One says 4. Doo-jin sat with that. He was not a large man or a loud one. He'd built what he built by being the calmest person in every room and the one most willing to do the thing no one else would. Lately he'd been building toward the largest score of his life, Kong Siwoo's logistics venture, the ports, the shipping lanes. A man who controlled those lanes could move anything through them. He'd spent 14 months and real money planting a man inside and buying access. The wife was supposed to be the easy part. Leverage. You don't move a man like Kong by threatening his business. You move him by taking the soft thing he loves. The soft thing had hospitalized all 5 in 4 minutes. "Show me." A grainy fragment played on the wall screen. 12 seconds. A woman in a cream coat. A blur of motion the eye couldn't follow. He watched it 3 times. The 3rd time he leaned forward, not angry, interested the way a predator gets interested when the thing it was hunting turns out to have teeth. That's not a lucky housewife. Look at how she sets her feet before they even touch her. Where did Kong Siwoo find a woman who moves like that? "Sir, should we back off?" Doo-jin tasted the words like they were foreign. 5 of his men, his reputation, For minutes, a woman with groceries. If word got out, and word always got out, he would be finished. Not killed. Worse. Laughed at. In his world, a man who could be laughed at could not hold what he held. No. The deal proceeds. The man inside stays. But I want everything on the wife. Where she came from, what she was before she put on that coat and started pretending to be furniture. Women don't move like that by accident. Find me her name. Her real one. The lieutenant left. Eugene stayed at the glass a long time, and a single dangerous thought took root and would not leave. What is she hiding from? Because in his experience, people who could fight like that and chose not to were always running from something. And a man who found out what you were running from owned you. Video surfaced 9 days after the Tuesday it recorded. The teenager who'd stood frozen with his phone hadn't posted right away. He'd been scared. He'd shown his friends, who didn't believe him, then a few more, who did, and somewhere in the slow spread someone convinced him the internet needed to see it. So he posted it. By the time Kia saw it, it had 2 million views and a name. She was on the couch with the laptop, deep in Park's phone records, when her phone started buzzing and would not stop. A news alert slid across her screen, and she felt the floor of her careful, quiet life tilt. She clicked it. There she was. Full color, clear. The sigh. The phone call. The persimmon that rolled and never fell, already slowed down and set to music. The grocery assassin. The billionaire's bodyguard wife. The woman with the indestructible shopping bag. 9 days of careful quiet, gone in an afternoon. And the worst part, the part that turned the cold to ice, wasn't that the world had seen. It was who else would be watching. Anyone hunting her now had her face, her gait, 12 seconds of technique any professional would read instantly. She'd just been handed to them, slowed down, and set to music. Her phone rang. Siwoo. She kept her voice exactly as soft as it always was. Hi, love. On the 58th floor, Siwoo was in a board meeting when it started. His phone buzzed, then every phone around the table lit up at once, 12 executives all very carefully, not looking. Then his assistant opened the door without knocking, pale, and slid a tablet across to him, without a word. He watched his soft, sweet wife, who pretended she couldn't open jars so he'd feel useful, break a grown man's arm without changing her expression. He didn't move. He dragged the video back to the start and watched it again slower. The cold face the whole country feared had gone past cold into something with no temperature at all, and the people who knew him best recognized it and were afraid, because that stillness was the most dangerous thing he owned. He was not watching his wife fight. He was a man with money and walls, and a deal worth more than a country, looking at footage of 5 men who had come for the one thing inside, all those walls that actually mattered to him. He stood up. Meeting's over. The pleasant tone emptied the room in under a minute. Then he answered his phone, warm and easy, because 2 could play the game they'd both apparently been playing. Hi. You're famous. You saw it. The whole planet saw it, love. I'm coming home early. We'll talk when I'm home. Are you all right? I'm fine. I'm not hurt. Siwoo, I can explain. I know you can. I'm not angry. I want you to hear that before I hang up. Lock the door. I'm leaving now. He hung up, then made one more call to the head of his security, and his voice was not warm at all. Find out who those 5 men worked for. Everything. Today. Someone sent people for my wife. When I find out who, I'm going to take apart everything they have ever built. He came home at 4 in the afternoon, which he never did. She heard the door and stood and braced herself. She'd faced down armed men with a steadier pulse than she had walking toward her own husband. She waited for the questions. Who are you? What was that? Why didn't you tell me? She had answers ready for all of them, half-true, protective. Siwoo looked at her a long moment. Then he said, You dropped 3 persimmons. Kia blinked. What? In the video. You carry the bag the whole time, never touches the ground. Very impressive. But right at the start, when the first man grabs your arm, 3 persimmons go over the side. I counted. Those were the good ones. You said everybody wanted the good persimmons. And you dropped 3. That's what you want to talk about. They were expensive, Kia. I put 5 men in the hospital, Siwoo. Yes, and you protected the eggs and the rice and let 3 perfectly good persimmons hit the pavement. For someone so precise. 3, 4, 5 full seconds they stood there, the dog looking between them, the whole impossible day balanced on a joke about fruit. Then it cracked, the terror and the rehearsed speeches and the 9 days of carrying it alone breaking apart at once, and she laughed, helpless, and he was already laughing too, and he crossed the room in 3 steps and pulled her into him and held her so hard the dog barked in protest. I was so scared, she said into his shoulder. I know. I've got you. He held her a long time and didn't ask a single question. When he finally leaned back, his face had gone gentle and serious at once. I don't know what that was today. I don't know who you were before me. And I'm not going to ask. Not until you want to tell me. Whoever you were, you're my wife, and I trust you, and you'll tell me when you're ready, and not 1 second before. Her eyes stung. She had braced for an interrogation and gotten the one thing she'd never once been given. Room. You should ask. Any sane man would ask. I'm not interested in being a sane man. I'm interested in being your husband. He kissed her forehead. I ordered too much food because I panic order when I'm worried, and I've been worried since 10 this morning. Come eat. Tonight you don't have to be anything except mine. Later, after the too much food and the dog asleep between them, she lay awake against his chest and thought, I'm going to tell him. Soon. He deserves to know who he married. She just had to find the right moment. Across the city, Eugene had gotten his answer. His lieutenant had set a single sheet on the clean glass desk. A name. A real one. And a file behind it with so many redactions the black bars told their own story. Eugene had read it twice, gone pale, and then, slowly, begun to smile. A week passed. The internet, which has the attention span of a struck match, found something new, and the grocery assassin slid off the trending lists. Siwoo's security stayed quietly tripled, and he said nothing more about the video, and neither did she, and the silence didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like trust they were both growing into. Life closed back over the crack, like water. They made the bed together. He still couldn't operate the toaster. One evening, he taught her to make his grandmother's soup, standing behind her at the stove with his hands over hers on the spoon, getting more in the way than helping, and she let him, because the getting in the way was the whole point. They reorganized the wardrobe one rainy Sunday, and he held up the persimmon scarf and insisted on draping it on her, stepping back to admire his work like he'd invented the color orange. And underneath all of it, quietly, Kia kept working. In the hours he was at the tower, she chipped at it, Park's burner, the cut trail, the shape of the patient hand. She got closer. Not close enough. Whoever it was stayed just out of frame, professional, but she could feel the size of him now the way you feel the size of a thing moving under dark water. She didn't tell Siwoo any of that either. But something had shifted in her that week. Every soup, every fussed-over scarf, every night she fell asleep safe against his chest, it all pressed on the same tender place. He gave me room. He didn't ask. A man who could do that had earned the truth. By the end of the week, she'd stopped asking herself whether to tell him. She was only waiting for the evening that felt like hers. It came on a Thursday. No reason. No danger. Just the right kind of quiet. They'd gone out for a walk after dinner. No driver, no plan. Just the two of them and the dog along the river with paper cups of something warm. The water moved dark and easy beside the path, the city glittering across it. He was telling her about a board member who tried to pad an expense report and gotten caught in the dumbest possible way, and she was laughing, and somewhere in the laughing, she felt the moment arrive. She just knew, the way she'd always known things. Siwoo, can we sit? There was a bench facing the water. He didn't ask why. He steered them to it and waited, his cup forgotten in his hands. The dog sensed the change in the air and lay down across her feet. You asked who I was. That day, with the persimmons. And then you said you wouldn't ask again until I was ready. She turned the cup slowly. I'm ready. And she told him. New Orleans. A father who'd been a military instructor, who taught her to read a room before she could read a book, who turned hide-and-seek into evasion drills so she wouldn't know she was being trained. A mother with a detective's badge and a detective's eyes, who taught her the most dangerous thing in any room was usually the person everyone had decided to ignore. By 16, I could take a weapon off a grown man before he finished reaching for it. I thought that was normal. She told him about the night they didn't come home. A case her mother was working, something that reached back and took both of them in one stroke. About being 17 and packing a single bag and understanding that the only way to survive what she felt was to become something that didn't feel it. So she disappeared. The skills her parents gave her were the only thing she had left of them, so she used them. Private security first. Then the work without a name. Protection. Hostage recovery, the kind that never made the news because the whole point was that it never made the news. I was good at it. One of the best anyone had. That's not pride. It's just true, and it's the loneliest true thing I know. Because being the best at that means you stop being a person. You become a tool other people pick up when something has gone very wrong. You don't let yourself love anything, because loving something is just handing someone away to hurt you. She finally looked at him. And then a cold, arrogant, impossible Korean billionaire walked into a room I was working and forgot how to talk. And I thought, that man is going to be a problem. A breath of a laugh escaped him. His eyes were bright. I was so tired, Siwoo. Her voice cracked. And you were the first quiet I'd ever had in my whole life. The first thing I wanted to keep. So I put it all down. Every skill, every name. I wasn't lying to you all this time. I just folded her up and put her away, and I let everyone think I was soft, because soft people get left alone, and being left alone with you is all I'd ever wanted. That's who you married. Not the quiet wife. Her. Both of them. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was afraid that the second you knew, you'd look at me differently, and I couldn't lose the way you look at me. It's the only thing I've ever had that I was scared to lose. For a long moment, Siwoo said nothing. Then he took both her hands, the hands that had done all the things she'd just described, turned them over, looked at them like they were something precious, and pressed a kiss to the back of each one. Thank you for telling me. That's it? That's all you? No. I need you to hear this, and actually believe it because you've spent your whole life learning the opposite. He tightened his grip. Nothing about how I look at you has changed. Nothing. I knew you were extraordinary the day you didn't laugh at me when I made a fool of myself. I just didn't have the details. Now I do. And the only thing I feel is that I love you more, because now I know exactly how alone you were for how long, and I get to spend the rest of my life making sure you are never that alone again. She was crying now, quietly, from a place that had been locked a very long time. And one more thing. His jaw set, and the soft husband and the cold shark were the same man. I know something's wrong. The 5 men weren't random. You've known since the day it happened, and you've been carrying it alone, trying to protect me. How did you know? Because I know you now. And because my people keep hitting walls, and I think you've been hitting the same ones from the other side. His thumbs moved over her knuckles. So here is what's going to happen. You're going to stop carrying it alone. Whoever this is didn't come for my wife. They came for us. Your battle is our battle. You spent your whole life fighting alone, and I am telling you that part of your life is over. Siwoo, these people are dangerous. Then we'll be dangerous back. You're terrifying with your hands. I'm terrifying with a phone and $40 billion. They're going to find out what we are together, and they're going to be very, very sorry they touched the one good thing either of us has. She looked at this impossible man who had heard the worst and loneliest truths she had and answered them with I love you more and your battle is our battle, and something in her chest that had been clenched shut since she was 17 finally let go. In all those years, in all those rooms, no one had ever once said we. She leaned across the bench and kissed him like the world was ending. It wasn't ending. But across the city, Dujin was holding a file with her real name on it, and a plan was already taking shape behind his calm, patient eyes. Dujin had read a great many files. He had never read one like this. It sat on his clean glass desk, thin, which was the first thing that frightened him, because the dangerous people had thick files, and the truly dangerous people had thin ones. Page after page of redaction, sentences swallowed by censor bars, dates erased, locations reduced to coordinates that led nowhere. His people had pulled it from sources that did not officially exist, and most of what they'd paid for was confirmation that the rest could not be bought. Her real name was at the top. Kia Davis. American. New Orleans. After that, the file stopped cooperating. But he could read the shape of it the way you read an animal by the size of the cage built to hold it. Operations referenced only by code. Postings on 3 continents. And in the margins, where the black bars thinned, words that did not belong in the file of a decorative wife. Extraction. Recovery. Sole operator. And once, in an after-action note, someone had failed to fully redact. Subject completed objective despite total loss of support element. Dujin sat with that line a long time. He knew what it meant. Everyone else on the operation was dead, and she had finished the job anyway and walked out and lived. Alone. He understood, finally, that he had sent 5 men to kidnap a woman who had walked out of operations that killed everyone around her. A lesser man would have run. Dujin was not a lesser man, and that was precisely his problem. The wounded thing in his chest, the part that could not stand to be laughed at, refused to let go. He'd spent 14 months and real money on those shipping lanes. He was not going to walk away because the man's wife turned out to be expensive. But he wasn't a fool either. You don't outfight a weapon like that. He'd watched 5 men try. You find the thing she's protecting, and you put your hand on it. He turned the redacted pages, and the predator's calm came back, because buried in all that black he'd found the one thing that mattered more than any operation she'd ever run. A woman who owned nothing she couldn't leave behind in 30 seconds had suddenly, inexplicably, stopped. She'd gotten married. She'd planted herself in one place. People who can do what she can do and choose not to are always protecting something. And she's not protecting herself. She's protecting him. He looked up at the photo of Kong Siwoo glowing on the wall, cold and untouchable. That's the soft spot. Not her. Him. Sir. The husband's the hard target. The walls, the security, the money. And the moment I have him, none of it matters. The deal proceeds. The man inside stays. But we stop wasting men on the wife. We were never going to win by taking her. We win by taking the one thing she came out of retirement to protect. You don't cage the weapon. You take the hand that holds it. Watch them. Learn their patterns, where the husband goes without enough men around him. When the moment is perfect, we take him cleanly in one stroke, and we use him to make the most dangerous woman in the country do exactly what we want. He looked at Siwoo's photo. Find me a day when Kong Siwoo is somewhere he shouldn't be, with people who can't protect him. He had read everything in that file except the one thing that wasn't written in it. What she would actually do to the man who took her husband. There was no redaction for that. No one had ever been stupid enough to find out. He was about to be the first. That same night, Siwoo didn't bring her a legal pad. He brought her a room. 2 days after the riverbank, he led her by the hand to a sealed and used study, opened the door, and stood back to watch her face. The study was gone. In its place was something she hadn't seen since her old life and never expected to see again, a full operations room. One entire wall was monitors, a grid of dark glass waiting to be lit. A long console beneath it, powerful, the kind of system that didn't come from a store. A server stack humming behind smoked glass. Secure lines. Encrypted everything. A lock on the door that answered only to the 2 of them. I had it built quietly, Siwoo said. My people think it's a private trading floor. Only the 2 of us have access. It's not on any plan of the building. You spend your whole life walking into other people's rooms with nothing but what you carried. I thought just once you should have a room of your own, with everything in it. You built me a war room. I built us a war room. Your battle is our battle. I wasn't being poetic. So, light it up. Show me how this is done. And she did. The wall bloomed with screens at her command. She moved through the system the way she moved through a fight. Fast, exact, no wasted motion, and Siwoo watched her hands fly across the console and understood he was finally seeing her work. She pulled up the street, the cut trail, what little she had on the burner. He pulled up the deal, the counterparties, his own org chart with Park Jun-so highlighted in quiet red. The 2 threads, side by side, lit up, visible in one place for the first time. 14 months ago, Siwoo said, staring at Park's red, is when I first started quietly building the venture. Before it was public. Before anyone outside a handful of people knew I was going for the lanes. Kia went still in the glow. Then it was never about you or me. It's about the lanes. Whoever this is doesn't want to beat me to the deal. They want to be inside it. You don't plant a man 14 months early to compete. You plant him to ride them. Someone wants to control those routes through me. And I was the leverage. She looked at her own face frozen on the screen, the cream coat. The 5 men weren't trying to hurt me. They were trying to take me, to keep in a pocket until you got difficult. This isn't a rival, Siwoo. This is someone who moves things through ports they can't move legally. Someone who needs your lanes the way a thief needs a key. He looked at the lit wall, and the cold shark came fully forward, aimed for the first time at something that deserved it. Then we stopped being the prey. Starting in this room. Tonight. And they built it together. Park, they wouldn't touch. They'd feed him, pour controlled lies down the pipe, so the hand kept believing its spy was working and stopped hunting for the spy it didn't have. Siwoo would turn his forensic accountants loose on every shell and quiet account, because money left awake no matter how clean you were. And Kia would take the dark, the burner, the number, the people behind it, the hand at the end of it all. I do the dark. You do the daylight. We meet in the middle, at whoever's standing there. Siwoo stood behind her chair, his hands on her shoulders, looking at the lit wall. I spent 3 years thinking the best thing I'd ever do was love you. I was wrong. The best thing I'll ever do is fight a war next to you in a room I built for exactly that. That's a terrible thing to find romantic. And yet. Across the city, Park Jun-seo reported up the line that everything was proceeding exactly as planned. It was the first lie in a war he didn't know had started. The war started quietly, the way the worst ones do. Siwoo went to work as if nothing had changed. He greeted Park in a corridor, asked after his family, mentioned in passing that the Busan routes would finalize within the month. A lie, gift-wrapped, and he watched Park's eyes do the small thing Kia had taught him to look for, the flick, the file it away. By that afternoon, the burner would light up with a date that wasn't real. Then he pointed 3 forensic accountants at the venture. Every counterparty, every shell, every account is shade too quiet. What are we looking for, sir? Money that doesn't want to be seen. Somewhere in this deal, someone else's money is touching mine. Find me the place they touch. Kia's work happened at night, in the systems Siwoo had built her. She started with the burner. Park called one number, a phone that turned on, received, turned off, leaving almost nothing behind. Almost. A phone has to live somewhere. It connects to towers, it sits in a place. A phone that turns on at the same hour through the same handful of towers has a routine, and a routine is a door. She spent 3 nights mapping it, the wall filling with tower data, a slow scatter of its tightening, night after night, around a single district across the river. Siwoo would come in around midnight, loosen his tie, set a coffee beside her, and watch her work, and twice the right question moved her a week forward in an hour. One night, he leaned toward the screen. There. That building. The glass one. I know that building. I tried to buy the company that owns it 2 years ago and couldn't because it's owned by another company that's owned by no one I could ever get a name on. I thought it was a paranoid rival. I walked away. Kia turned back to the wall, the circle, the glass building dead center of it. That's not paranoia. That's a man who builds himself out of names on purpose. That's the hand. She didn't have him yet, but for the first time since a Tuesday morning that felt like a lifetime ago, the unseen hand had a place to live. The old thing woke up in her, and to her surprise, it didn't frighten her this time, because this time she wasn't walking toward it alone. We're close. Siwoo put his hand on the back of her neck, warm and certain. Then let's get closer. Across the river, Doojin read Park's latest report, the one about Busan finalizing within the month, and felt the comfortable certainty of a man who believed his spy was working and his enemy had no idea he existed. He had never been more wrong about anything in his life. The first thing Doojin lost was money. Siwoo's accountants didn't strike, they traced. They followed the quiet money the way water finds a crack, and where they found Doojin's hidden capital touching the venture, they didn't seize it. They made it visible to exactly the right people. A regulator received an anonymous, immaculately documented packet. A bank's compliance office got a question it was legally unable to ignore. Two of Doojean's cleanest shell companies suddenly had their accounts frozen pending review, and the money inside, the kind he needed liquid to keep the operation breathing, locked up where he couldn't reach it. He sat in his glass office and stared at the freeze notices. How? Not loudly. The not loudly was worse. Then the street started going wrong too. Kia had the building now, and she did not storm it. That was never who she was. She took it apart from the edges inward, so quietly the center didn't feel it until the walls were already gone. A storage facility leased through 3 names emptied overnight. No forced door, no tripped alarm, no image on any camera. A courier route the operation depended on stopped being reliable. A man who moved sensitive things for Doojean was quietly visited in a way that left no marks and made him reconsider his career. She never killed anyone. But one by one the small load-bearing pieces failed, and no one could say how, and the not knowing spread through his people like a cold. Within 2 weeks, the calm crime boss who'd built himself out of borrowed names was afraid in his own building. "It's her," his lieutenant said finally, the words costing him something. "It has to be. The timing, the precision, nobody's seeing anything. It's exactly what was in the file. And the husband, sir. The frozen accounts, the regulator's packet. That's him. They're working together." Doojean was quiet a long moment. He told himself she had no idea he existed. That belief had quietly died, and he was only now attending the funeral. The weapon and the empire. One hand in the dark taking him apart, one hand in the daylight strangling his money, both closing toward the same glass office, the same man. A wiser man would have cut his losses and disappeared into one of his borrowed names. But Doojean could not stand to be beaten, and on top of that was the wound that had never closed since the 4 minutes on the street, the unbearable knowledge that if this got out, he was finished. He could not run. He could not win the slow war. They were better at it than he was, in both directions. So he did the thing cornered men do. He stopped thinking about winning and started thinking about leverage. Forget the routes. Forget the money. We move on the husband. Now, before they finish us, find me one window, a meeting, a drive, a single hour where Kong Siwoo doesn't have enough men around him. I don't need perfect. I need soon. Sir, if we take the husband, the wife will come. Everything in that file says she'll come. Doojean's jaw tightened. Yes, she'll come. That's the entire point. She'll come alone. Because that's who she is, and for one moment, in one room, the most dangerous woman in this country will be standing exactly where I want her, with the only thing she cares about between us. Find me the window. For a few days, it felt like they were winning. And maybe they were. They could feel the thing across the river failing. They just didn't know how close to the edge they'd pushed him, or what a man like that does when you push him there. So that morning, they let themselves breathe. They made the bed together. The kitchen filled with the familiar smell of coffee and faint disaster, and she nudged him aside and fixed it, and he wrapped his arms around her from behind and said good morning like it was the only news worth reporting. "We're close," she said, watching the pan. "A few more days and I'll have his name. A real one. And then it ends. And then it ends. And then I'm taking you somewhere with no cell towers and no shell companies and no persimmons, and we're going to do absolutely nothing for 2 weeks." He turned her around in his arms. "Have I told you you're terrifying and brilliant, and I've never been more attracted to anyone in my life than watching you dismantle a criminal empire in your pajamas? You mention it nightly. It bears repeating." He kissed her, slow, the dog huffing at their feet, the morning gold through the windows, and for a moment there was no war at all. He had a meeting that morning, a small one off-site with a single old contact about a piece of the legitimate business that had nothing to do with the deal. 2 guards, a short drive, an hour at most. He kissed her at the door, twice, because once was never enough, told her to eat an actual lunch, reminded her to lock the door. "I love you. I'll be home by 1. We'll figure out his name tonight." She watched from the window as he crossed to the car, the cold face sliding on as he hit the lobby, and she stood there a moment longer than she needed to, smiling. Then she locked the door, exactly like she'd promised, and went into the room to work. Doojean had found his window. It was small, nowhere near perfect. But the off-site meeting had leaked through Park 3 days before, The one piece of real information the couple hadn't thought to fake because it had nothing to do with the deal, and Dujin had decided imperfect, and now was better than perfect, and too late. It happened fast. The car never reached the meeting. A truck, a blind corner, a second vehicle boxing it the way the 5 men had once tried to box Kia and failed. These men did not fail. 2 guards was not enough. Dujin had sent 12. There was a struggle that lasted seconds. The guards woke up later in an alley with no memory of the faces. And Kang Siwoo, the man with the walls and the money and the cold face the whole city feared, woke up in the back of a moving vehicle with his hands bound and a bag over his head and the dawning, furious understanding that he had been taken. His last clear thought before the hood went on was not for himself. It was, don't let her come alone. He already knew she would. Back in the penthouse, Kia was deep in the system, hunting the last threads toward Dujin's name, when her phone buzzed. Not Siwoo's number. An unknown number, a single photo, and she looked at it, and the world went very quiet and very cold all at once. Her husband, bound to a chair, his lip bleeding, his eyes furious rather than afraid, looking straight into the camera as if to say, I'm sorry, don't. Beneath it, 3 words, come alone. No police. Kia set the phone down very gently. The woman who had spent 18 months being soft, who lied about whether she was hungry, who let a man knot her ties and fix her shoes, folded herself up and went away. And the other one, the one from the file, the one who had walked out of rooms that killed everyone else, opened her eyes for the first time in 18 months. She looked at the photo of her husband one more time. Okay, she said quietly to the empty room. Then she went to get him back. She didn't rush. Rushing was how you died, and dying was how you failed him, and failing him was the only outcome that did not exist. She went into the room he'd built her, and worked. The photo had come from a burner, but a photo is a file, and a file is data, and data has to travel, and she'd spent 3 weeks learning every tower in that district. It took her 11 minutes to pull the location. A warehouse, industrial edge of the city, near the water, inside the same circle she'd been drawing smaller every night for weeks. Then she did one more thing before she left, the thing that proved she wasn't entirely the woman from the file anymore. She called Siwoo's head of security. Min Jae. Listen and don't argue. They have him. I have the location. I'm going in alone, because that's the only way he stays alive. You are not coming through the door. You're going to do this instead. Ring the area, quietly, far enough out no one inside would see. Choke every road. Keep the money frozen so there was no clean way to disappear after. Have medical staged. And the moment she gave the word, and only then close the net. You let me get him out of the room. Then, you make sure no one in that building ever walks free. His battle is our battle. He'd want you with me. This is how you're with me. A pause. Understood, ma'am. We move on your word. Not before. The partnership, even now. She wasn't as alone as Dujin thought. She just walked through the door that way. In the warehouse, Kang Siwoo was bound to a chair and was, against all sense, calm. Dujin found this unnerving, and Dujin did not like being unnerved. You should be more frightened. Most men in your position weep. Negotiate. You've offered me nothing. Siwoo, lips split, looked at the man who'd spent 14 months reaching into his life, and smiled. You're the shipping lanes. 14 months. Park Jun-seo. The man I couldn't buy out of a building across the river that's owned by no one. We've been taking you apart for weeks, and we didn't even have your name. And here you are, handing it to me in person. Dujin's calm flickered. We. My wife and me. Siwoo's smile didn't reach his eyes. Nothing about him reached his eyes right now, and for the first time Dujin saw the cold thing the city feared, bound to a chair and entirely unafraid. You froze when you read her file. I know you did. And then you did this anyway. You read what she is. You held the proof in your hands. And you still decided the smart move was to take the one thing she loves and put it in a room and wait for her to come. He laughed, low, and it raised the hair on the arms of the men along the walls. You really should have stopped after Tuesday. Dujin stood, the calm back because it was the only thing that had ever kept him whole. She'll come. And when she does, I'll have the most dangerous woman in this country in a room I control, with you between us. That is not a mistake, Mr. Kong. That is the plan. No, Siwoo said quietly. That's the day you find out the one thing that isn't in her file. What she does to the man who takes me. Dujin's phone buzzed. A motion sensor at the building's edge. Then another. Then the feed from a camera over the south door went to gray static, and the one beside it, a quiet darkness spreading across the screens one window at a time, exactly the way his operation had been going dark for weeks. He felt, for the first time since he was 19, something cold move up the back of his neck. He looked up at the chair. Siwoo was smiling at him. She's here, Siwoo said. The warehouse lights went out. The dark was hers. Dujin had men along every wall, armed, trained, more than enough to handle one woman, and in the light that might have been true. But she had not come into the light. She had taken the light away first, and now the warehouse belonged to the person who'd spent a lifetime learning to work in rooms exactly like this one. She did not come in shooting. She didn't come in loud. The men heard nothing at all for a long, terrible moment, and the nothing was worse than any noise. Then, near the south wall, one of them simply stopped being upright. The man beside him heard a soft sound, a shift of weight, a breath that ended early, and turned and found empty space, and then he was on the ground too, and didn't know how. Panic is a current. It moves through frightened men in the dark faster than any attack, and she let it do half her work, moving between them like a held breath, taking them out one at a time. Never where they expected. She did not kill them. She had never killed anyone, not even now. But there is a great distance between killed and stopped, and she walked every inch of it. A wrist. A knee. A nerve cluster that drops a grown man like a cut string. By the time Dujin's lieutenant got a flashlight up with a shaking hand, half the room was down, and the other half had stopped being soldiers and started being prey. The beam swung wildly and caught her once, in the middle of the floor, walking, unhurried, toward the chair, and the men who saw her in that single sweep of light would spend the rest of their lives trying to forget the expression on the face of the billionaire's quiet wife. Then the light was gone, and so was the man who'd held it. Dujin had dragged the chair against the far wall, and when the fallen flashlight rolled across the floor still lit, it showed him standing behind the bound man with a gun pressed to his temple, his lifelong, unbreakable calm finally, completely gone. His hand was shaking. Stop, Dujin said. His voice cracked. Stop, or I. You won't, Kia said. She was a few feet away. He hadn't heard her arrive. He never would have. Your hand's been shaking since you opened my file. You're the only person in this room who actually understands what's standing in front of him, and that's why you can't hold that gun steady. Because some part of you already knows how this ends. I'll kill him. But it came out as a question. Maybe. And if you do, there is no place on this earth, no name you can borrow, no building you can hide inside, that I will not find. You know that too. It's in the file. She took one slow step closer. But I'm not going to threaten you. I'm going to tell you something true, and then you're going to make your choice. She stopped, close now, the gun between them and her husband's life balanced on a shaking finger. That man in the chair found out what I am, and he came home and made a joke about persimmons. He built me a room so I wouldn't have to fight alone anymore. He said my battle was his battle, and he meant it, and no one in my whole life had ever said that to me before him. You took the one quiet thing I ever had. So, understand me. Whatever happens in the next 3 seconds, you have already lost. The only thing you're choosing now is how much of you walks out of this room. Siwoo, the gun at his head, said, of all things calmly. Took you long enough. I had to coordinate with your security, she said, not looking away from Dujin. You delegated? Your influence. My hands. We talked about this. And Dujin, hearing the impossible easy intimacy of two people who had already won, made the choice cornered men make. He swung the gun toward her. It was the right tactical decision, and it did not matter at all. The instant the barrel left Siwoo's temple, the only thing that mattered was gone. And so she moved. It took less than a second and a half. The gun went one way, discharging once into the concrete ceiling. Dujin's arm went a direction arms do not go. And then the calm crime boss who'd believed to the very last instant that he was the patient hunter was on the floor of his own warehouse, disarmed, looking up at a woman who was already no longer looking at him. Because she was past him, on her knees in front of the chair, her hands on her husband's face, the operative gone as fast as she'd arrived. Just a wife now. Just terrified. Just his.
Hey.
Look at me. I've got you. Where are you hurt? Lip. Siwoo mumbled, grinning at her through the blood. Pride. He hit me. I want him arrested for hitting me specifically. Siwoo. I'm okay. I knew you'd come. Bound as he was, he leaned his forehead against hers. You told me not to come alone. I know. I didn't come alone. She was working at the ropes, her hands, for the first time since a Tuesday morning that felt like a lifetime ago, allowed to shake a little. I brought everything you built me. She got the last knot free and pulled him up into her and held her husband in the dark of that terrible room like he was the only solid thing in a falling world, because he was. Behind them, Doojin started to laugh, thin and broken, a man watching his entire life come apart at the hands of a housewife with groceries. Kia reached over without letting go of Siwoo and clicked the fallen flashlight off. Don't. Whatever you're about to say. You read the file. You knew.
You did it anyway.
You should have stopped after Tuesday. Then she lifted her phone to her ear, her other arm still around her husband, and said one word.
Now.
And every road Doojin might have used filled. All at once, with the men Siwoo's money had been quietly positioning for an hour. The net closed. The doors opened. The operation that had reached so patiently into 2 lives over 14 months ended, in the dark, in under a single minute, with its architect on the floor. She didn't even watch them take him. She was already walking her husband out into the light. The aftermath was quiet, the way Siwoo's victories always were. Doojin's empire of borrowed names came apart in daylight over the following weeks, dismantled one quiet company at a time, except this time the hand doing it had a name and $40 billion and a very personal reason. The frozen accounts were never unfrozen. Park Jun-seo was handed to the authorities with a packet so complete it took the prosecutors a week just to read it. The shipping lanes closed at twice their original value because the only thing better than a deal is a deal your enemy spent 14 months and his entire life failing to steal. The city never knew most of it. It was still busy with the grocery assassin, replaying 12 seconds of a woman in a cream coat, never imagining there'd been a second act in a dark warehouse that made the first look like a warm-up. That was fine with both of them. And on an ordinary evening, weeks later, back in the penthouse that smelled like coffee and faintly burnt toast, the two of them were making the bed together, because some things were still just theirs. Siwoo's lip had healed. The room he'd built her sat quiet behind its locked door, the screens dark, waiting, the way a thing you hope you never need again still gets to exist. He smoothed the sheet on his side and didn't look up, which was how she knew the question coming was the real kind. Do you miss it? Miss what? The old life. The dark. Being her. You were so good at it, the best anyone had, you said. And these last weeks, in the room, in that warehouse, I watched you come alive in a way that, I won't lie, was the most magnificent thing I've ever seen. He set down his pillow. Now that it's over, and it can be quiet again, is quiet enough? Or did taking her out, even for a few weeks, remind you of something you gave up for me? It was a brave question, and she knew what it cost him to ask it. This man who had everything and feared, underneath all of it, only ever losing her. So she gave it the answer it deserved. She actually thought about it. There had been a moment, in the dark of the warehouse, when the woman from the file had opened her eyes and felt something close to joy at being let out. She didn't lie to herself about that. And then she thought about everything else. The healing lip, the hair sticking up, the toaster he would never learn to operate, the dog snoring on the rug, the persimmon scarf over a chair, the groceries she could finally finish buying without 5 men interrupting her morning, the half-made bed they made together every single day, a man who'd watched her break 5 people and come home and asked about fruit, who'd built her a war room and called it ours, who'd been bound to a chair with a gun at his head and used his one clear thought to worry about her. She thought about being 17, packing a single bag, learning the only way to survive was to love nothing she couldn't leave behind in 30 seconds. And she looked at the one thing she would never, ever leave behind. For 1 second in that warehouse, she woke up. And it felt like coming home to a house I used to live in. I won't pretend it didn't. She tossed the pillow onto the bed. And then I looked at you, tied to that chair, and I remembered the difference between the two lives. In the old one, I was the most dangerous person in every room, and I was alone in every single one of them. No one who'd ever once said my battle was theirs. She crossed to him and took his face in her hands, the same hands, all of it, the soft and the lethal, the wife and the weapon, finally one person. This is the only house I've ever lived in that I don't want to leave. You asked if quiet is enough. Quiet isn't enough. Quiet is everything. It's the only thing I never thought I'd get to have. So no, I don't miss it. Not even a little. And then, because the moment had gotten entirely too serious for two people standing over a half-made bed, she shoved him backward onto it, and he caught her wrist and pulled her down with him, and the dog barked in furious protest, and they were both laughing, tangled in the half-made sheets, the war room dark behind its door, and the city outside still believing that Kong Siwoo had married a quiet, lucky, harmless girl. They had no idea. And the two people who knew the truth, the soft one and the lethal one, the empire and the weapon, the man who couldn't work a toaster and the woman who'd cleared a room in the dark, were far too happy and far too safe and far too completely each other's to ever correct them. Outside, the city glittered on, none the wiser. Inside, they finished making the bed. Eventually. If this story kept you all the way to the end, you already know what to do. Drop a like, hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments which moment was your favorite, the persimmons, the riverbank, or 11 minutes in the dark. And if you want another story like this one, there's one waiting for you right on the screen. Go on. Press play.